Okay, so in the last video, we verified that our queries per sub-question run had been implemented correctly, and we were getting the agent traces that we expected. So now let's go take a look at why we seem to have this regression going from an error mean of 0.3 now to 0.5. So yeah, let's take a look at what's going on. So it looks as though we have some new regressions aside from the usual suspects. So we always had 207, 261, and 132 failing. They've been very common across the experiments. But now we have a regression for example 20 and also a regression for example 244. Let's just take a look at one of these. Let's take a look at 20 in this case. I'm just going to go ahead and look at the predicted marks, and I'll also include that with the correct marks as well, just so we know. No, let's also include the diff, just so I can see actually where things are going wrong. So let's unfold these. Okay, so the error at the moment is with B, where we're giving one mark too many. So it looks like we're falsely giving a mark where we shouldn't. So let's take a look at B and see why that might be the case. So the mark's predicted as 1. It should therefore be 0 because of the diff we just saw. The overall thoughts say, let's have a look. The mark scheme states that any valid reason for not using account A is acceptable, specifically mentioning not leaving the money in the account for 3 years. The candidate answer gives a different yet valid reason that he might lose the money because the bank could keep it forever. Although not identical to the mark scheme's example, the example is acceptable as a valid reason, therefore the single mark should be awarded. Okay, so why now suddenly has the agent decided that it is valid when for the last 7 experiments it has deemed the example to be invalid? I think maybe before diving into this, let's take a look at the rationale given by the previous examples before then starting to think about what the difference might be. So what we can do in this case is let's go ahead and instead of grouping by the experiments, let's just group by the example ID. And then we can look at all of the examples of 20 across all experiments. So let's just go ahead and ungroup by experiment first. And then let's go ahead and group by example ID. Okay, great. Now let's go and check all of our 8 runs for example 20. Okay, great. And as we suspected, we can see that, yeah, we got it exactly correct on every single version. Even the simple agent, the very simple, very first example, got this totally correct. And for the first time, we're overestimating the mark. We're rewarding the mark where it should not be awarded. So yeah, we need to work out why that's happening. Well, let's go ahead and select all of these rows, and then we can go and select all of the data and take a look at the reasoning across all of them. So I'm just going to click here and then do shift click at the bottom. Okay, and then let's go and decide what we want to see. And actually this is correct, I think, because I checked this out earlier. But what we can then do is just hide all and select what we want to see. In this case, let's take a look at predicted marks. Great. And let's then, yeah, so the problem is with question B. Well, let's maybe first look at the old examples. So again, basically we show the most recent first. So the larger row numbers are the older examples. And again, 6, 7, and 8 is when we didn't have structured outputs in the agent, which is why we have this underscore instead of having this A and B in the output. And all we had was the marks and the rationale. So let's take a look at these rationale. So again, 8 is the first one. We say for part B, the answer should explain that account A gives slightly more money. Derek might not want to account as for 3 years, has poor liquidity. The student's explanation about the bank, quote, keeping the money forever is not an acceptable financial rationale. No marks. Okay, and then 7, when we added the mark scheme, said the explanation is not a valid reason and does not address the restriction of no withdrawals for 3 years, therefore no mark. Interesting. And then for 6, again, very similar. The explanation given does not correctly address why you want to use account A, namely that's locked over 3 years, therefore no marks. Okay, so it's pretty consistent there. What about then the most recent 5 experiments? Let's start with 5. It says for part B, the answer needs to explain why account A must not reside. So all similar. It seems like consistently we're saying the same thing. Same with 4. Locked for 3 years. The candidate's answer by keep the money forever, he could lose it, is not a valid explanation. Does not clearly say there's 3 years. Does not meet requirement. The candidate explanation, the bank might keep it forever, could lose it, is not a valid reason. Okay, so I think, yeah, it seems as though we've been consistently getting it right. We also have these overall thoughts as part of the reasoning as well. These are in the latest 2, where we have the the kind of the per mark reasoning. And again, on 2, we get it right. The explanation of valid reason, such as lack of liquidity, money locked for 3 years. The candidate answer instead gives an unrelated, implausible reason, making it unacceptable for the mark scheme, therefore non-awarded. So why have we now decided suddenly, what's changed that means that the candidate's answer is now apparently different yet valid? Well, if we take a bit of a look, let's dive into this one. Obviously, there's something different about row 1. So let's go ahead and compare just rows 1 and 2. And let's actually look at the trace and see exactly what the agent is seeing differently between the two. Let's start off with row 2, which was the penultimate example. And let's take a look at the trace, and let's go see exactly what the agent saw. So we have the inputs. Let's take a look at the messages where we got this. So we got your task is as follows. Let's actually expand this out again a bit, like so. So we have the general guidelines, and then we have the question you need to mark is this. The sub-question breakdown, including each sub-question, associated mark scheme, and associated answer as follows, and so on. Okay, great. Now let's take a look at this one instead. So this was the most recent example. So let's look at the inputs again. Let's look at the inputs, let's look at B. In this case, we did it per sub-question. So let's look at B. Let's look at the messages. Again, your task is toward this, and the general guidelines as follows. Okay, here we go. So the question you need to mark is explain why he might not want to use account A. So we haven't included the broader question context. All we've done on this first iteration of the per sub-question agent is that we've given the specific sub-question, and each agent gets the specific sub-question and the specific mark scheme, but we're not providing the broader context of the entire question. We're not giving the explanation that kind of sets the question up to begin with. So actually, to show what that is, let's take a look at the full question. Because again, the agent is simply getting the question you need to mark is explain why he might not want to use account A, which is totally out of context. We do get the mark scheme, which is he may not want to leave it there for 3 years while marked, except any valid reason. But without the broader context of what the whole question is all about, a valid reason is a much more open-ended thing for this agent that does not have access to that context. So let's remind ourselves of what the actual question is by including the question as well. Let's then take a look at the question. Okay, so all of this is missing. All our agent is getting is this. And it's not getting, here are the interest rates for 2 accounts, account A, 3% per year, account B, 4% per year, etc. Withdrawals any time, withdrawals at the end of 3 years. So if you had access to this information, you would know that the bank might keep it forever is definitely not a valid reason given what we know. So yeah, I think the obvious thing here is to make sure the agent, even when it's doing per sub-question reasoning, make sure the agent still has access to the entire question and the entire context, and that should resolve at least this new regression, and presumably it'll also resolve the other regression that we've seen for the other question as well. Yeah, so I think we've got to the bottom of it. So in the next video, let's go ahead and implement that. And yeah, keep going and let's see if we can get to 100% eventually. But for now, let's wrap up there. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.